Good evening. Good evening, everybody. Thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm Tom Bevan. I'm a lawyer with the Bevan Associates law firm. We're an Ohio law firm located just outside of Akron. We're about 70 miles from here. And we've really had the passion for the last 40 years at my firm for helping people like you that have played by the rules but have been harmed by corporations that don't play by the rules. And we've represented people across the state of Ohio. We've represented a lot of people right here in Columbiana County who are exposed to toxic substances such as asbestos and benzene and vinyl chloride. And I got to tell you, I'm just as mad about what happened here as everyone in this room. To happen in a place that's so close to where I live and where I've represented so many people is personally very upsetting to me. Not long before the derailment, the train derailment here, that Norfolk and Southern train passed about a half mile from my house. And it passed through hundreds of towns across our state. And what happened here could have happened in any one of those locations. My associate attorney, Josh Grunda, has family that lives here in Columbiana County, and I'm sure they're being affected by this. And my wife, who was visiting her elderly parents, was in the danger zone the day after the derailment. So this is really personal to us, and that's why my firm has helped to put together this amazing team of lawyers and advocates to speak to you at this public seminar tonight about past cases of train derailments, the medical and legal issues and public safety concerns that may arise from a train derailment case. Our speakers have helped thousands, actually tens of thousands of people in other communities who have been impacted by the effects of similar catastrophes. And we're happy that you all came out here tonight to learn more about what you can do to protect yourselves following this disaster. I'm sure there's not a person here that wouldn't rather be somewhere tonight, but we appreciate you coming out here to listen to the speakers that we've assembled for you. Now, before I turn things over to our speakers, I've got to go over a basic ground rule. And I mentioned earlier about playing by the rules. Well, we as lawyers, we have rules that we have to follow, and we're going to follow them tonight. Our rules are created by the Ohio Supreme Court, and they tell us that we're permitted to hold a legal seminar to the public like this, but unfortunately they won't let us answer your individual questions tonight or meet with you one-on-one. We could do that at another time if you reach out to us. So we urge you to feel free to contact us for a consultation, an individual consultation. There's a packet, contact information, which is through this website, eastpalestinejustice.com. So please reach out to us. Please get one of these if you haven't gotten one already. They're laying around out there. And help yourself to those and reach out to us if you have questions or want to contact us directly. Again, we're not allowed to do it tonight based on the rules set up by the Ohio Supreme Court. So now I want to, and I also want to mention and feel obliged to mention that you're certainly free to contact any other lawyer of your choosing as well. The fact that you're here doesn't mean that you can only contact us. So now I want to introduce to you one of the people fighting for the people of this community in this effort, Erin Brockovich. You've probably seen her on TV demanding answers from companies and from the government in matters such as this. So I'm so happy she could be here to address all of us tonight. And I present to you environmental advocate Erin Brockovich. Thank you so much for coming out here.
Thank you. This comes up. Hi. Good evening. Thank you for being here. My name is Erin Brockovich. I'm not Julia Roberts. I want to make you laugh a little because it's awful stressing times for all of you, and I know that. So I'm so thankful that you came out. I've been in town, I got here Wednesday night, but I've been in close communication with many of you that started emailing me on February 4th about
got it.
I'm back. Okay. So I got in town on Wednesday, and you know, a couple of people have always asked, you know, they can handle the truth, whether it scares them or they don't want to hear it, but what they can't handle is a mistruth, being misled, and a lie. Lights out! In the dark.
Two.
There you go.
Two.
In the dark, we will continue to talk. So, by the light. Woo! By the light. So it is because of you and a terrible tragedy that you reached out to me. And we are here to share information that we know. We have no problem telling you we don't know. But I'm also here to tell you something that I think you're figuring out. And that truly is Superman's not coming. all of the answers. And that becomes, oh my gosh. I'm telling you, one more mic, one more lights out is going to be a big old F-bomb and it's supposed to watch my language. So please. Please. Are we good? We're good. All right. I'm here tonight for you. And a message that maybe you don't want to hear. But you already know it. In the absence of information, sometimes we get comfortable. We get complacent. And I can say that because I know I have too. But we believed in something, or someone, or an agency, that if there's an issue, will in fact do the right thing by us. But in a moment like this, you will become the strongest advocate you have. And I have found that communities already know this. I'm not coming here tonight to tell you something you already don't know. You have an amazing set of instincts. You have a good set of common sense. And communities need that. Oh my gosh, come on. I've been watching what tests do come out, don't come out. I've been reading the reports. You have 44,000 fish that have been killed. The numbers are right. People are expressing concern for their health. Their animals are dying. You're doing water sampling out here. You evacuate people because there's toxic chemicals in the air. Then everybody comes home and they're told it's all safe. But then you tell them don't drink the water. Then you tell them to drink the water. It creates a lot of confusion. But you own this narrative. Not an agency that wasn't here, and certainly not in Norfolk. There wasn't here. They happened to you. And I learned these communities, they start to own what happened to them. You know how you feel. You know your children better than anyone. You know if you're sick. You know if you smell something. You know if the water's a funny color. You have the ability to become, and you will become, your own critical thinker. You will get information. You will ask questions. You will demand answers. You will listen to that gut and that instinct that will keep you connected as a community. Don't let what has happened here define you. I've done this enough times. It's not my first rodeo. And I will tell you, we have to band together. Don't expect somebody to give you the answers. Unfortunately, this is not a quick fix. This is going to be a long game. I want to share with you how many people are in support of you and introduce to you. And there is a whole lot of women in this room, and they're really good with their instincts. They're really good with their children. They know what's going on. And when these moms get together, and these moms and these communities join with each other, you start getting 50 and 100,000 gift shop moms together, I'm telling you right now, things change. Things start to happen. And I want to share with you tonight that the moms of Flint, Michigan, who went through so much, came all the way here tonight to help the moms of East Palestine organize. And so Liz Mays, who we all say that, we're here tonight from Flint in support of you.
Can you find her and ask her what her...
There you go. So they wanted to be here and meet all of you. But until you know all the information, all the facts, and some of the things you might never know, we're going to say it. But I have learned, and communities know, to do that worst case scenario. Because if I don't know what that is, I can't make plans, and I can't be prepared, and I can't protect myself in the absence of an agency or a company doing the right thing by you and your family. So we've got something very simple that I have heard from you. I've been emailed by you, and that is you are now the ISD leaders. This is what happened to you. It will be your narrative. And don't let anyone knock you off that game of what in fact has happened to you. I'll never forget when I started in Hinkley, and it actually happened to me here. It actually happens to me all the time. Hey, why are you here? You're not a doctor, you're not a lawyer, you're not a scientist. So wait, what was you not? Go away. I'll tell you, that happened to me 31 years old in Erin, California. And I was telling you, that's the way it is right now. I don't have to give you that. To be a human and to tell you there's three-headed frogs and that green water is messed up and I'm saying something. And every one of you in this room knows what happens, knows what you experience, knows what you've gone through. You understand the fear. And don't let anyone else tell you what happened to you or how you feel. In fact, that it happens. And that's concerning me here. All of a sudden, you sound sick. And everyone moves on. And then the community becomes forgotten. And in California, when I started that case in 1991, that contaminant hit their aquifer in 1958. It is still contaminated today. PG&E has had to buy up everybody off of their land, and they are still under another 50-year cleanup. Influence Michigan. Was that 5 years ago, Melissa? 6? 9. Almost. Still today, they are still fighting for information. They're still fighting to get service lines in, and people are still drinking water contaminated with lead. We still see ongoing effects from the BP oil spill. In Leroy, New York, where they had a training run decades ago, we were up there about 8 years ago. A group of the girls are getting sick. And we find out, still, the groundwater and the well water is contaminated today. There's a moment here for this community and for all of us, and it's a teaching moment. We cannot afford, agency or company, to continue to kick the can down the line and ignore a deeper issue that's going on. We've got failing infrastructure, companies with poor corporate models that cut maintenance, that put all of us at risk, and continue to just think once we poison the community, it's just going to magically go away. We often find out 5 and 10 years down the road after you were told it was safe. Oh, oops, Houston, we have a problem. There is actually a moment here with this community rising up, and you have been, that we can take a different turn, a different track, if you will, a better message, and start dealing with our environmental issues, start dealing with our failing infrastructure, start giving information to people so we can better protect our health. I was born and raised in Lawrence, Kansas. I feel like I am at home, and I mean that. And what I was brought up to believe, and what I know, and that I know you know, the great You will be the citizen science. Nobody knows you better than you. You're going to hold to those instincts. You know what's happened, and you will continue to speak up and rise up. That's our plans for change. So with that, I will be quiet for now, and I'm going to have Michael Watts come out. Michael Watts I've known for quite a few years. We've worked on the fires. He's somebody that cares. He's awfully smart, but has about, did you say 160 slides of information that he'd like to share with you tonight. So thank you for your time. I'm sorry about the lights. Sorry about the microphones, but here we are, and everybody please, this is Michael Watts.
Thank you. So before I started, they said, I want you to use this mic. And I said, oh, shit. It works, so this is good. I'm Michael Watts, and I'm really sorry to have to be here. And I'm really sorry that you're experiencing what you're experiencing. It must have been terrifying. And my job is to not tell you what you want to hear. My job is to tell you the information as it is. And so I want to give you the good and the bad and the ugly of the situation in which you find yourself, both from the standpoint of what I would call the court of public opinion versus what you can expect in a court of law if there is litigation. But before we start, I just want to make some observations. The hazard of train derailments, while it may be new to this community, it is not a new phenomenon. It's been happening for well over a century. This hazard is the direct result of maintenance choices and inspection choices and dollars to fund maintenance and inspection, or dollars withheld to fund maintenance and inspection so that you can pay corporate compensation to your executives, buy back stock, and the like. And so the amount of money that is being budgeted for things that the railroads know they have to do has a direct relationship with whether these events happen. So how long have we known about the hazard of derailments? At least a century. And I just want to show you a couple of examples. In Guadalajara, Mexico in 1915, during the U.S.-Mexican War, right after it, 600 people died. In 1970 in Romania during World War I, 800 people died. In France, another troop carrier derailed. 800 people died. Move it up to World War II. In Italy, in Balvano, Italy, 500 people died. Move it up to the 1980s in Bihar, India, 500 deaths. Train derailment is an expedited trip to the next life if there's a derailment. It is a shockingly dangerous phenomenon, and so the duty to prevent it in the law should be higher. Now, you're seeing a lot of things that's in other countries. I mean, over in Ethiopia, how do they know how to build a train track? Well, they build them just like we do. And unfortunately, we maintain ours a lot like they do. 425 deaths in 1985. Recently in Russia in 1989, 575 deaths. It's a hazard that has been known consistently for more than a century. But I didn't show you any examples in the United States. Maybe that's just a problem that other people have. We don't have that here in the United States until 2023, right? No. The train derailment hazard is a hazard that is well known here in the United States. Let me just give you 5 examples in the last 30-something years. And I started in 1991 because that's when Erin started picking on PG&E in Hinckley, California. 19,000 gallons of herbicide dumped into the river in Dunsmuir, California. In 1992, up in Superior, Wisconsin, 15,000 gallons of benzene, which we're going to talk about in a bit, right? This happened 31 years ago. In North Dakota, 146,700 gallons of ammonia. In Paulsboro, New Jersey, 23,000 gallons of something that you are now familiar with, vinyl chloride. We're going to talk again about this one because the railroad that operated the train that that jumped the tracks was the same railroad that was operating the train that derailed in your town. In the law, this is what we call notice, and we'll talk about this in a little more detail. More recently, in 2015, it says deaths, and it should say gallons, I apologize, but acrylamide, all sorts of hazardous chemicals. We live in a society, for better or worse, that chooses to ship the most deadly, the most toxic, the most dangerous chemicals ever made by man in rail cars right through populated cities. Now, whether that's a good choice or not is not for me to say, but if you are going to ship these kinds of chemicals through populated areas or small towns like this, you damn sure have an obligation to make sure that you don't jump the tracks. Prior Norfolk Southern train derailments, is this their first rodeo, to quote Ms. Brockovich? No. Let me just talk to you about 4 or 5. In 2002, in Tennessee, 10,600 gallons of sulfuric acid were released after this company derailed a train there. In 2012, in Paulsboro, New Jersey, 23,000 gallons of vinyl chloride were released after a derailment on a bridge in New Jersey. 2018, in Pennsylvania, 46 double-stack cars, 23 well cars jumped the tracks. Fortunately, in that one, they were carrying Listerine and Pampers. And of course, what just happened to you? 1.1 million pounds of vinyl chloride had to be released within days of this to keep your town from exploding. What happened to you is not new. What happened to you is a hazard that has been known by this company for a long time. And what happened to you is a course of conduct that is repetitive, entirely preventable, but not prevented. I asked the question to my staff in preparing for this, has anyone ever died from a train derailment? In Norfolk Southern's prior train derailments, and one of my law geeks went on something called Westlaw. It's like Google for lawyers. And we looked up all the cases involving Norfolk Southern that were reported, a bunch of cases in all jurisdictions, 623 derailments, made it to the appellate courts. And then of all those 623, we were looking for experts, so we looked at all that. But one thing that we did find in looking and reading all these cases, and I've read every one of them, is this. There was a history of reported cases, and we came across this one from a decade ago in Paulsboro, New Jersey. And the reason this is important to me is when you dig up the case, you'll find a case called Scott versus a whole bunch of companies, but Norfolk Southern's in there. And what happened in that case? The claims arise from exposure to the chemical vinyl chloride following a train derailment on the East Jefferson Street Bridge over the Mantua Creek in Paulsboro, New Jersey on November the 30th of 2012. Plaintiff Michael Hardy and decedent Wessie Hardy were residents of New Jersey at the time of the incident. The decedent was working in her yard at the time of the incident. She was admitted to the hospital due to difficulty breathing, chest pains, burning, and irritation of the eyes. Familiar to anyone? And she passed away 4 days later. This is, in the practice of law, what we call notice. You killed somebody a decade ago because your choices allowed one of your trains that you were responsible for to jump the tracks while you were carrying one of the worst chemicals ever invented by mankind. So what did you do about it to prevent it from happening again? Well, they got sued. They've got insurance. They settled the case. Insurance pays for it. What did they do? I don't know whether they sent flowers to Miss Hardy's funeral, but there she is. Her death was unnecessary, and what happened to your town was unnecessary as well. They had a decade to prevent it from happening again. Then I asked the question, well, do we have any statistics as to how often this happens to Norfolk Southern? And it turns out that the Transportation Administration, the U.S. Department of Transportation, and you saw its administrator here yesterday, has a rail equipment accident incident database. And you can go in and you can type Norfolk Southern, as my law lawyer, my partner Jay Henderson, who's here. And one of these things, he just looked for 20 years, from 2003 to 2022, and it says that Norfolk Southern reported 3,397 events that were classified as a derailment. Start doing the math, folks. 3,397 events classified as a derailment over 20 years. This is happening about every 3 days. It's not always catastrophic, but the data does not lie. So what did Norfolk Southern do to prevent derailments before this one? Well, we know that last year in 2022, they had 770 cars carrying hazardous materials that were involved in accidents, up from just 79 cars in 2012. How is that possible? An almost tenfold increase. It says the year before it should be from 2012, but the bottom line is, in the last decade, since poor Ms. Hardy was killed by exposure to vinyl chloride, their accident rate has gone up almost tenfold. Why? Well, we know they've got plenty of money because they're spending $10 billion buying back their own stock, which is what companies do when they're too flush with cash and they want to raise the stock price. They just buy it back. There's been a lot of articles about the relationship between Norfolk Southern's profit motives and more accidents. And the bottom line is, when you look at the data, safety experts are saying this focus on financial returns may be partly to blame for the derailments and accidents like the one in Ohio. And we've got data with respect to hazmat cars, which are in green. We've got releases, and you can see it's persistent. It's not frequent, but it's persistent. And then the profits and the corporate bonuses keep getting paid as the maintenance budgets are trimmed. They have to file, because they're a publicly traded corporation, something known as a report on 10K. It's the annual report to the shareholders. And in effect, we can see what their net income is in 2022, 21, 20, and just in the 2 years since 2020, their income has gone up by 62%. That does not happen by accident. That is a function of corporate planning at the highest levels of the company. How much they're going to spend on maintenance, how much they're going to spend on inspections, how much they're going to spend on technology, or not. They saved enough money to buy back $10 billion of their own stock recently. So what happened on February the 3rd of 2023? You know, I drove to Canton to meet with some lawyers on this earlier today, and we came through the town of Salem, Ohio. And you know where it is. It's not far from where this derailment was, but it's plenty up the track. And this company, Butech Bliss, had a surveillance video that a lot of you all have seen. And I'm not playing the videos because they tend to eat it up, but you can see flames as this car number 23 is going by. And so the bottom line is that we start to see those flames well before this ever comes into your town. And you might have the question, what the hell is a train doing on fire? Fires on trains happen. It was the result of a hot axle and plastic pellets in the rail car, says Ms. Henley, who is the chair of the NTSB, who in my view is to be congratulated for getting a preliminary report out within 3 weeks so we know what the heck was going on. So you have the fire. There it is. Make it a little bigger and fuzzier. There it is. Miles up the track. Now, I know every little boy wanted to be a train conductor, but as an old man, I am confused how it is in 2023 technology that the crew could go mile after mile after mile without knowing that one of its cars is on fire. And we'll have to talk about that. But as we look at what happened, the NTSB report that came out yesterday, if you've read it, there are detectors along the track that detect the temperature of these cars to see if anything is elevated. And we can see that at milepost 79.9, the suspect bearing from the 23rd car had a recorded temperature 38 degrees above ambient temperature. And then at 69.01, it was 103 degrees Fahrenheit over ambient temperature. And then finally, 253 degrees before somebody told him with an alarm, it's time to stop the train. Leading to the very obvious question, is that a good thing to be 103 degrees above ambient temperature without an alarm? But they set the alarm at 117, so the crew never got a warning until the third heat indicator had it at 253. So the wayside defect detector or the hot bearing detector transmitted a critical audible alarm message instructing the crew to slow down and to stop the train to inspect the hot axle. So we still have time to prevent what's happened to you. But now we got another problem on the way to the play, another maintenance issue. When they apply the brakes, there's a little problem. The train comes to a stop after the acceleration from the automatic emergency brake application. Then the crew gets out and they notice that there's smoke and notify the Cleveland East dispatcher of a possible derailment. Now, Mama didn't raise the smartest kid, but my common sense says, how does a crew not know that they derailed? 5 derailed DOT 105 specification tank cars, 28 through 31 and 55, carrying 115,580 gallons of vinyl chloride, continued to concern authorities because of the temperature inside one tank car was still rising. Thus, you had the automatic or the intentional release of all this stuff. The initial fire was the result of the hot axle and the plastic pellets in the rail car. And so here we are. Eventually, it's 253 degrees Fahrenheit above the ambient temperature. Now, I've learned from coming from the south, it gets cold here. But even if it was 40 degrees, we're boiling water temperature above your temperature in terms of what this was, and it was well above critical levels. The chair of the NTSB says had there been a detector earlier, the derailment may not have occurred. Now, crew receives a warning telling them to immediately slow and stop the train to conduct an inspection. During the deceleration, the rail car wheel bearing failed, maintenance problem number 2, causing the derailment. The NTSB's got all this equipment, the wheel set and the bearing. There are various causes of roller bearings to overheat, including fatigue cracking, water damage, and mechanical damage. All things that you see if you have a proper inspection program. All things that you miss if you choose not to pay for inspections and choose to send those dollars up to corporate executives or stock buybacks. You know the result. There were 38 cars derailed and fire damaged, an additional 12 cars, according to the NTSB. And you've seen the pictures. And again, I am so sorry that this happened to you. You must have been scared to death. So then they perform what's called a controlled release. Now, let me just say, you've got some people that have done a really good job. You can tell. Your fire chief informed people, your mayor's done a great job, your senators wrote letters, your governor. Their job is to get you information. But this controlled release is not something that I think that we can necessarily be critical of, because when you go in and you realize how flammable and how combustible vinyl chloride is, they were doing this in an attempt to keep your town from exploding. Okay? It's not very controlled, is it? By the way, you just brought up a good point. Who saw that? All right. That's important, because when he says it's not a controlled release, and I agree with you, it's a ton of toxic stuff, you are in what's called the zone of danger for purposes of the law. We'll get to that in a little bit. Okay? Here's what it looks like. So what's happened since? Your fire chief has held press conferences, in my view, done a good job. Your mayor's been all over people. I think he has every reason to be proud, and I commend him. I met him in the back, and I was laughing with him. I said, you know, that day that you jumped all over Biden for being in Ukraine instead of being here, I said, I just know Buttigieg is going to beat us here. And, you know, here we are. Both the governors, the Ohio governor and the Pennsylvania governor, from different political parties, have come together to provide information to their constituents, and I think they deserve to be somewhat commended for that. I'm not going politics. I got it. There you go. No, yeah, all right. So, in any event, you got a lot of people that are working hard trying to figure this out. Okay? Try to get information. Our friends at Norfolk Southern, while all of your mayor and your fire chief are giving you information, they're causing another derailment up in Michigan the next week. 'Cause remember, every 3 days, it's got to stay on schedule. So here we are. I want to call out Jessica Conrad and Jim Stewart. If you didn't get to see the CNN town hall the other day and watching members of your community jump the CEO of this company, just absolutely jump him. And he deserved it. I think Mr. Stewart said it best, you burned me. That's an example of what Erin's talking about. Those people did not have to get on a plane and fly to New York to be part of a town hall that the whole world would see, but they did because they cared. I can tell you, I've got a pissed off wife today. I'm not with her. It's a Friday night. She says, why do you always leave me? And I said, because I'm afraid of Erin Brockovich, and she says we need to help these people. But Erin Brockovich was called here by, I've seen the emails from your folks, hundreds of them. Hundreds of them. She keeps flipping them to me. When are we going? You got to get there. You got to give them the information. And so here we are. The NTSB preliminary report, I can tell you, I do a lot of transportation litigation, air crashes and stuff. It's so frustrating because typically the NTSB grabs all the evidence, puts it in a warehouse, doesn't let anybody see it, and they won't issue a report for well over a year. This preliminary report is a big deal, and they are to be commended for it. Okay, because now we know what happened instead of guessing. And this is important because one of the things that's happened between the 3rd and today is a game of politics, what I call the blame game of musical chairs. When the music of lies stops and the truth is revealed, there's not going to be enough seats for everybody. And again, I don't go politics in these things, but let me just give you some examples of what you're seeing. Everybody's pointing sideways, and you're stuck in the middle. Now, Trump comes on Wednesday, good for him. The mayor gets after Biden for not being here. Buttigieg comes on Thursday, good for him. Everybody's blaming everybody. Biden's tweeting, it's because of deregulation. We need to strengthen real safety measures, which, by the way, I agree with. They've got millions of dollars to oppose these common sense regulations, which I agree with. But the parties are pointing sideways. And the reason for that is we live in a country where every 4 or 8 years, the country changes its mind and we go with a Democrat, we go with a Republican, whatever. And so regulations that are created during Democrats are rolled back during Republicans and vice versa. It's all a bunch of whodunit. And I'm here to tell you that it's real easy to get misled during this political war game going on while you're stuck in the middle. I want to just use 2 examples. The bottom line is that we've got this derailment. We've got temperature sensors that weren't triggered. Is that something that should be the subject of regulation? I could make a good argument it is, okay? But we'll get to just 2 examples of non-issues that you've had to read about in 2 weeks. Remember the brake rule? There was an Obama-era brake rule, pneumatic brakes that they were trying to require when you're hauling these toxic chemicals. And then all these articles about the railroad company spending almost $500 billion lobbying against stuff to oppose common sense safety regulations. And therefore, it's got to be the Republicans' fault, according to the Democrats. And it's the Democrats' fault that Biden's not here, according to the Republicans, and it doesn't do you any good. Why? As we look at these electronically controlled pneumatic race, the reason the Democrats are jumping on Trump is he rescinded the rule. Whether he should have or not, we can have that debate, okay? But the bottom line is it was only going to apply to trains carrying at least 20 carloads of highly flammable liquids, and there weren't enough of those. So it wouldn't apply to this particular one. So that's red herring number 1. And we can debate whether they should all have pneumatic brakes. I personally think it's a good idea, but that's okay. Non-issue number 2 that you got to read about. Remember this deal about, well, hey, the train company stopped the new rule that 2 people were going to be required in each crew. And there was a big argument about that and lots of stories about it. And of course, my question is, how many people were on this crew? And the answer is 3 of them. So that's a red herring. So what really matters? What really matters is what happened to you, but I'm here to tell you, don't get into the political blame game of who should have regulated who. The law says it is this train company's responsibility. End of story, full stop. It is this train company's responsibility to keep their trains from jumping the tracks. I don't care which way you vote. They vote to hold back on inspection dollars. They vote to roll back technologies. They vote to not do maintenance, to save that money, and they take a risk on your back. That's what happened. We know what happened. I want to give you a little information, and you've read some of this, so let me just fly through it. What was in the trains? We've got very good information of which car was carrying what chemical, and I don't need to get into a whole lot of this detail because I know that you guys have been opening up the newspaper and reading about this stuff. Number 1, vinyl chloride. It's a flammable and toxic gas primarily used to make PVC pipe. It is a bad dude. When you ship vinyl chloride, you don't want to have to release 1.1 million pounds of it in a controlled burn. Okay? You got to keep it from being on trains that derail. And so this is being called one of the worst environmental disasters in American history, and vinyl chloride appears to be the main problem. It's highly mobile in soils and water, and I'm going to bring an expert up here in a minute to tell you a little bit about your water situation. There are people that say this deadly chemical should be banned. It certainly should be banned from derailing cars. The International Agency for Research on Cancer says it causes angiosarcomas of the liver, hepatocellular carcinoma, a different kind of cancer of the liver, cancer of the lung, neoplasms in connective and soft tissue, and other cancers. You don't want to breathe it in. OSHA requires this sign when employers are dealing with vinyl chloride. May cause cancer. The EPA, cancer is a major concern from exposure to vinyl chloride via inhalation. The Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, it's readily absorbed in the lungs. Drowsiness, loss of coordination, visual and auditory abnormalities, headache, disorientation, nausea, burning and tingling of the extremities. Over and over and over again, the issue of vinyl chloride is recognized to be so dangerous that there's even something in the Code of Federal Regulations, 29 CFR 1910.1017, that requires employers who inadvertently expose their workers to vinyl chloride to institute a program of medical surveillance. An opportunity for examinations and tests shall be performed by or under the supervision of a licensed physician and shall be provided without cost to the employee. And I know you didn't work for the railroad, but maybe you should be entitled to the same thing. Okay? Number 2, butyl acrylate. One of its manufacturers, Mitsubishi Chemical. It's a raw material for fiber processing agents, adhesives, coatings, plastics, acrylic rubber, and emulsions. Not the kind of thing that I want to drink. Another manufacturer, Jamarin, says it has a general toxic effect, irritates the skin, mucous membranes, upper respiratory tract, digestive tract. Thermo Fisher has what's called a material safety data sheet. Symptoms of headache, dizziness, tiredness, nausea, and vomiting. It's like I'm reading the local paper. Rash, itching, swelling, trouble breathing, tingling of the hands and feet, dizziness, lightheadedness, chest pain, muscle pain, or flushing. Ethylene glycol. The EPA basically says it's antifreeze. It's also used as a solvent in the paint and plastics industries. When I was growing up, my mama was real clear on one thing: don't drink paint. NIOSH, the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health, it can cause death if swallowed. That's what Mama knew and I didn't know. You may be harmed from exposure to ethylene glycol. There's a study by an author named Pataka. They've got metabolites that damage the brain, the liver, the kidneys, and the lungs through metabolic acidosis. It can cause profound shock, organ failure, and death. 2-ethahexyl acrylate. It's kind of an ester of acrylic acid. It's used as a raw material to make adhesives, coatings, construction materials, acrylic rubber, and emulsions. The EPA says even short-term exposure has been reported to cause drowsiness, lethargy, headache, nausea, convulsions, and respiratory and gastrointestinal irritation. Isobutylene. It's made for lubricants, asphalt, and the like. Not something you want to be breathing in. This product is especially dangerous because, according to Air Liquide, this product may displace oxygen and cause rapid suffocation. Not what you want to be breathing in. And lastly, benzene. I don't really need to talk about benzene because we all know that it causes leukemia. It's used as an additive to unleaded gasoline. Mama didn't even have to tell me not to drink the gasoline. It is a well-known cancer causer. The EPA says there's been an increased incident of leukemia observed in humans occupationally exposed to benzene. It's a known human carcinogen. And then we've got a byproduct of combustion, even though it wasn't being shipped. Some of these chemicals, when they go through the chemical reactions that occur during a combustion event, put off what's known as dioxin, a chemical known to cause cancer, birth defects, and other reproductive harm. So that's what you got exposed to. Hopefully not many of you, but that big cloud, not good. The fireball the first day, all this stuff was burning out. I want to talk to you about testing. I'm here to tell you that there is a difference between what people think about East Palestine, Ohio, in the court of public opinion. The whole nation is praying for you. And what a court of law will think about people from East Palestine, Ohio, if you bring lawsuits. It's a completely different thing. My job as a lawyer in bringing a lawsuit is you have to prove your case. You have to prove your case with evidence. We need evidence for you to have any potential of success in a claim for fear of cancer. And let me just talk to you about this. We put up a website immediately announcing this, and one of the first things that I asked them to do is put out a list of the diagnostic testing labs within 50 miles of East Palestine, Ohio. Click here, and when you do, you're going to get, within 50 miles of here, a list of facilities that will test your blood. I'm begging you, For your own good, go get your blood and your urine tested now. Now. It won't be in there, at least in detectable levels, as time passes. Is that free? I'm going to get to that in a second. Right now it's not free, but there's a lot of work being done to make it free. And I'll tell you about that in a little bit. So here's the groups in Ohio, right across the border. There's a bunch of groups in Pennsylvania. My encouragement to you is get tested. If it says you don't have anything, great. You've got the peace of mind of knowing. If it says you have something, you now have an objective medical basis for what's known of a fear of cancer. And I'll tell you why that's important. You asked if it was free. If you have to, go to Walmart and buy a bunch of these cups and start filling them up and putting the date on them. Whatever you have to do to create documentation of what's in your body. You don't have to do it every day. Okay? But this stuff is going to dissipate. Now, I want to talk to you a little bit about all the people that put this on just for a second. There's primarily 3 law firms. The Bevan and Associates, you met Tom. His partner Josh has been very helpful to us. His associate Angeli. Patrick Bevan, one of the partners over there, is here. And couldn't have done this without them. They taught us what we need to do when we're in Ohio. Have to be good guests, not talk too much about the Longhorns. Apparently Ohio State's a big deal here. Now, in my defense, my daughter, who has been a lawyer for about 3 days, just took the bar, married a boy from Columbus, Ohio, and now I got to hear about Ohio State being great all day long. And then, as if to add salt to the wounds, January the 2nd of 1984 was one of the worst days of my life. The Texas Longhorns were playing in the Cotton Bowl, and all they had to do was beat Georgia, and we were ahead, and some kid named Craig Curry drops a punt, muffs the game, and we lose. And I remember saying, that's not any big deal. Nebraska's going to beat Miami tonight. And then Bernie Kosar comes up and turns it into a lifetime scar. I do want to thank him for being here. He reached out to us. It was kind of cool when you're a big football fan like me, getting an email from Bernie Kosar. And he cares about this community, and I thank him for being here. Okay? I've got a big law firm. There's about 50 lawyers and about 200 people. Alicia O'Neill, my law partner, is here. She's the head of our mass tort department. Jay Henderson will be my partner working on this case together with Paige Bolt, and there's a bunch of other ones. Doug Boxer, Gary Morrow, Michael Bernard. You've seen Doug. He was the one hand in the mic that didn't work. He does better work than that, but they're with a group called Sunbridge Legal. And then, of course, we've got non-lawyer consultants, medical doctors, hydrologists, Erin, and the like. And I'd like you to meet one of them. Bob Bocock, if you have heard about these forever chemicals, PFAS or PFOS, it's an enormous environmental problem. And he is perhaps the world's most accomplished hydrologist. And he has done just some preliminary looking around. And Bob, would you come up and just tell him a little bit about yourself, and then I want to show a video he shot today.
Thank you, Michael. I realize that this meeting tonight is about you guys getting a lot of questions answered, so I'm going to be really, really brief. I've served as a water master appointed by the Superior Court in California for over 25 years. I travel around the country. Erin and I have been in over 500 communities just like this one. This is a pretty tough situation you find yourselves in. We know a whole lot more now than we did when you first reached out to Erin over 2.5 weeks ago. But it's important for you to understand, and I don't want to cause a lot more grief than you're already experiencing. But based on over 30 years experience traveling this country, I will tell you, you're in a situation that you're going to be dealing with for the rest of your lives if you stay here. This is not going away. It's not going away tomorrow. It's not going away 10 years from now. And we base this on, you heard Erin talk about Leroy, New York. Leroy, New York is a kind of situation that I reach back to that's most like this community. And you saw Michael talk about all the rail derailments. Leroy, New York had a derailment of one car of TCE, which is a similar chemical to vinyl chloride. As a matter of fact, it breaks down into vinyl chloride in the environment. What makes vinyl chloride very, very difficult to work with once it's in groundwater is it does not adsorb to granular activated carbon. All carbon chemistry usually adsorbs to carbon, and you can take it out of the environment, you can take it out of the water. Vinyl chloride, not so good. It doesn't work like that. In Leroy, they lost about 30,000 gallons. You've already heard here, you guys are up over 115,000 gallons. Okay? In 1970, that's when that derailment occurred. In 1991, the US EPA called it a Superfund site. In 1999, they started working on cleaning it up. In 2011, Erin and I were called to that town on an unrelated matter, and I kept asking questions because I just couldn't get to the bottom of it. And the people said, well, have you been out to the derailment site? And I said, no. And we went out there, and we pulled back the bushes, and there were 250 55-gallon drums of the contaminated soil that the EPA contractor had extracted, put in the barrels, and put in the bushes and allowed to rust out in 2011. Okay? So you ask yourselves, how quickly, the EPA comes out and they say, we're going to hold them accountable. They're going to pay for everything. Do you know when the groundwater plan is required by the railroad? It's Lehigh Railroad. It's not the one that's associated with this, but Lehigh Railroad's plan, you know when it's due to the US EPA? August 2024. So don't expect things to happen fast. One of the things I want to convey to you, and then we can get on to questions, is there's really almost two different types of environmental disasters that have occurred here. There was the derailment that spilled the chemical into the surface. That percolated down, goes into your groundwater table, and it starts moving around the community. Usually that takes a long time because it has to go through the soils. It doesn't just sink down and start spreading around. It takes months and years to migrate, okay? Except in your particular soil characteristics. Okay, so we got to think about that. The other was they dug a burn pit and they threw in a match. Okay, and that created the dioxins that have impacted all the community. You're looking at the potential for dioxin exposure for 5 to 10 years. It's going to take that long to leave the environment. The EPA, Department of Transportation, Department of Defense, they're all asking, what can we be doing better? There are things that when we get into making recommendations to you, how many of you have home HVAC systems? Heaters, air conditioners. Those filters need to be changed now. And they need to be changed next week. You need to dust your homes. You need to get in your attic dust. All that stuff needs to be removed. And it needs to be removed by experts that know how to remove it. So there's the dioxin situation. Dioxin's a bioaccumulator. Okay? And what that means is questions about your gardens. Yes, it will be uptaken into the plants, and it will be consumed, and you will bioaccumulate it. Bioaccumulation is usually where the worm has it, gets eaten by the fish gets eaten by a bigger fish, you eat the fish, goes all the way through, you get it in your system. It's going to stay with you for a very long time. Everyone in this room has dioxin in their bloodstream. We need to understand what those base levels are. Now on to the water situation, and this is where Michael said he's going to show a video that I took right before coming over here in your park. What concerned me is you have, as a community drinking water system, a source water protection plan prepared by the state of Ohio. The federal government gave all 50 states the funding to prepare these plans. The plans were then issued. I've read yours. You have 5 groundwater wells in the park down the street here, various locations around the park that go to your drinking water system. When I first looked at this, and I had consultations with some of the people with your water department, and I said, you're probably looking at 6 to 12 months for it to migrate from the spill site over here. I can tell you today that is not the case. It is as if you have a whole bunch of channels and moats around this community. The drinking water wells are right behind this creek that they're aerating. The contamination has already migrated here and is going down. I've read over 2,500 source water protection plans that have been written by community drinking water systems around this country. I've never read this line. The state of Ohio has determined that the groundwater protection from surface contamination in this community is 0. It literally put a 0 in the paragraph. I've never seen a 0. I've seen 5 feet, 10 feet, this time frame. You guys are 0. So if this aeration is taking place today, you are already in a situation where the community drinking water system may become contaminated, okay? Groundwater is very shallow here, and if the chemicals are already at this location, we've got a real problem, okay? So some of the things that we're telling people is this community drinking water system needs treatment immediately, okay? That would be air stripping for the vinyl chloride, followed by granular activated carbon polish. Those systems need to be installed yesterday. The other thing that I've recommended to the contractor out here is they're air stripping this, which means the vinyl chloride's coming out of the water and going into the air. Don't let your kids ride their bikes down there. I saw a bunch of kids down there watching these guys pump this water. Stay away. It's going into the air. This needs to be air stripped in a container. You see these rain for rent tanks all over town? They need to be spraying and aerating that water in those tanks and then vacuuming off the air and cleaning the air and capturing it. Right now that stuff's going right into the air. So if you live adjacent to a creek that's experiencing this aeration, you need to keep your windows closed and you need to watch it very, very carefully. And we need to work together to get this practice stopped. So I'm going to turn it back over to Michael now. I'm here to answer the technical questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're almost done. There's one slide that the lawyers that I consulted with about how to do this right say I have to say. The 3 firms involved are not a partnership. We're separate firms joining together to work on this. Non-lawyer consultants like Bob and Erin and the others are paid for their time. There are many other fine law firms in the state of Ohio, I know a lot of them, that you can and should consider. If you've already retained a lawyer, follow their advice, not mine. I'm not your lawyer yet, okay? I'm not allowed to give you legal advice on your specific case during a public meeting. So this is frustrating to me because it's kind of an unusual rule in Ohio. I'm not allowed to answer your questions in this room, which is frustrating, but that's what they tell me. The materials have to be located at the exit. If you don't have them, you're welcome. They'll be out there. In terms of the litigation, let me just run this through real quick.
To date, more than 1 million Americans have died from COVID-19.